Patient Voices is proudly supported by sponsors who have no editorial control over the content. Hi, everyone. I'm Yvonne Diaz. I'm a co-founder of Oncogene Cancer Research, and I'm really pleased to be joined again with Loryn, who's living with HER2 positive stage 4 lung cancer in the Boston area. So welcome back, Loryn.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Why don't you remind us of your diagnosis and what it was like getting there so we can then get into some of the things of what happened next?
Sure. So I had just gone through this 6-month ordeal of multiple ER visits, multiple CT scans, being told that my symptoms that I was experiencing, which was really just fatigue and back pain, that was anything from just being a new mom to pneumonia to an autoimmune disease, until I finally ended up getting diagnosed at the ER with a metastatic disease. And then being told over the phone that it was stage 4 lung cancer.
That's just insane. And also what a road. I think it was like 6 months for you to get there. ER visit, so many different scans and specialists all having a look and going from you have a couple little nodules to you have stage 4. So maybe recap where your disease is. And then also when we were talking recently in part 1, which if you haven't seen that, please do go back and rewatch that because it's quite a story. And then you found out you did have HER2. So maybe tell us a little bit more about your disease and then what happened next.
Sure. So while I was inpatient, I knew that my disease was at least in my liver, my lungs, and then my spine and my ribs. They could see lesions as well. I ended up finding out that I had lesions pretty much to every major bone and joint in my body. So it was my elbows, my knees, my feet, the top of my skull, my jaw. So I ended up getting more scans as time went on to kind of figure out the extent of the spread of my disease, which explains the joint pain that I was feeling, why they thought it was an autoimmune disease. And then being told, all of this at the hospital. I knew that the hospital that I was at, this kind of smaller center, was really more designed for stage 1 kind of cancers, not someone as young and healthy as I was with a stage 4 illness. I knew that I wanted to be somewhere that could handle what I was dealing with and also handle it in, a way that felt kind of personal, that they took what I was going through seriously and that they were going to treat my family, not just me. So I ended up switching over to Mass General for my care, and they were able to see me very, very quickly. We were still at that point waiting for the results of my tissue biopsy. So they knew that it was lung cancer, but they didn't have the biomarkers or any of that information. That they were told it was going to take 3 weeks to come back. So I immediately did a blood test for my biomarkers.
So how did you know about that? Because your average patient, I don't know about you, I didn't know about biomarkers. I certainly didn't know about blood tests. So what
Mhm.
helped you there?
So I had learned a little bit about biomarkers from the doctor who had spoken to my husband and sent him, all of these educational materials about lung cancer. So it talked a little bit about the different biomarkers that you could have. And so I kind of had that going into my first appointment with Mass General. But my oncologist was really amazing at going through what the options could be, what it would look like if I didn't have a biomarker. But given that I was a non-smoker, young, that it was likely that I had a biomarker, and that what the blood test would come back to show that if it didn't show anything, that we could wait for the tissue test. So she was really great at kind of outlining like what the different options are and the directions that it could go. At that point, I'd only researched a little bit. I was very overwhelmed with of this, new diagnosis and everything that I was dealing with. And then still trying to keep it together for my son who had just turned 4. His birthday was literally the week before I went into the hospital. We made it through his birthday party and then, all of this kind of happened. So, we're trying to hold things together for him too. First meeting with Mass General was a virtual meeting. They were able to get me in 2 days after I had contacted them for that virtual appointment. Um, and, it's a very like educational kind of conversation. kind of letting me know what to expect, that I was likely going to go through, chemotherapy, likely some radiation, and kind of preparing me for what was to come, which I really appreciated.
Such a night and day experience from what you had at the other
Yes.
hospital where you were told, "We'll see you in a month,"
Hmm.
to taking the time to educate you because and I find, like, I personally have seen, and I kind of experienced that no one really wants to tell you about the biomarkers I found and
Hmm.
some patients I speak to because you may not have one.
Right.
And but it sounds like they did it in such a sensitive way for you. If
Hmm.
you have them, we'll do this. If you don't, you'll have that. But I feel like, and I understand not wanting to build false hope, but
Hmm.
starting to empower you is so important. So that's really wonderful to hear.
Yeah. And from that meeting, I did start to look into the biomarkers a little more. So you kind of mentioned that false hope. I started to learn a little bit about the biomarkers it could be. And I almost kind of developed this like hope of what biomarker I hoped I had based on what I was seeing and what treatments I was kind of finding were out there. So it is kind of interesting that we kind of do that. Even dealing with this diagnosis, I was still trying to find places of hope, hold on to in that moment.
So when did they communicate you had the HER2 and
Mhm.
how did that feel and how did they start explaining what your treatment process would be like?
So they set up another virtual appointment for me once I got the HER2 information back. When I was told it was HER2, I had kind of this moment of like disappointment. Talked about that like false hope. So I was like secretly hoping for EGFR or one of the more common mutations that I was reading had many treatment options. I saw that it was a 1% of lung cancers, have a HER2 mutation. So it kind of felt like this, I built myself up again. And then just to be, kind of given another blow was, my initial feeling. Which is interesting because now I find a lot of strength in having her too, and it kind of motivates me. I'm kind of grateful for my HER2 mutation, but at that moment, I wasn't. It just felt like another thing. I've got lung cancer at stage 4, and now I've got this super rare
Yeah.
biomarker that they don't know a lot about, and that there aren't a lot of treatments.
I love that you're now like quite like not
Mhm.
happy as much as anyone can be
Yeah.
happy with these things, but you're kind of
Mhm.
like, actually, it's not a terrible thing. What's changed that for you?
Yeah, so my oncologist, actually, one of her focuses is on HER2 lung cancer. So she, during that next visit, was very optimistic with me. She was realistic. I should say she was realistic. She was like, there aren't a lot of treatment options out there, but there's a lot of clinical trials, right now. And there is a lot of hope, for HER2 up and coming. HER2 tends to affect kind of younger women who are non-smokers. So it's starting to get a little more traction. It's much more common, the HER2 mutation in breast cancer. So there's a lot of drugs available for the breast cancer community, and they're slowly starting to do clinical trials to see the effectiveness for lung cancer. So that conversation made me feel a little better. It was at that point that I finally connected with the Young Lung Cancer Initiative. My sister actually found a video of another member of the community who had done some advocacy around her HER2 diagnosis and said, "Look, this girl's almost just like you. She's young. She, kind of had a very similar story. Maybe you should connect together." And so kind of all the pieces started to fit together. And kind of found this, community of other young lung cancer patients and other HER2 patients, which was really helpful for me to see that there are other people out there living with this. So I've kind of over time, once I started to feel better, it took some time. It
Yeah.
wasn't an overnight mental shift, but once my line of treatment started to be effective, I really just started to kind of own my diagnosis and say, having her too, I want to be vocal about it and share my story for other people who, could end up with this diagnosis to see that, there's hope out there too.
I love that, and I'm so grateful that you are sharing your story because I think exactly the same. We're looking for other people who are similar to us with similar experiences and just trying to see
Mhm.
the hope, see how we carry on. So I think that that is brilliant. So I'm interested in your treatment line. So when did you start your treatment and what was that like? When did you start to feel better as well? Because you were not in a great way. You know, we're working, raising your son and going on with life. So what was going on there?
Definitely not in a good place. While I was waiting for all of these results and these appointments, I was deteriorating physically. I was walking with a cane or with crutches. I couldn't bear any weight on my left leg. So they very quickly got me in for radiation, for just some palliative radiation to kind of help me with being able to walk again, which helped greatly. That was a huge relief. My first line of treatment started. So I think I was told it's a HER2 mutation, and then they got me in, I think, the following week for my first chemotherapy. I started with the kind of platinum combo, the carboplatin and pemetrexed. That was my first line of treatment. And my oncologist had kind of walked me through why we start with that. It was likely not going to be a treatment I would be on for a long time, that she wasn't hopeful that I was going to be fix everything, but that I needed to start with that to be able to get to my next line of treatment, which was in HER2, which is a targeted chemotherapy for HER2 lung cancer. So I started with the carboplatin and pemetrexed, and then a few rounds of radiation. I was having trouble with lifting and straightening out my elbow. So they did some radiation there too. So kind of the first like 2 months was just kind of back to back appointments. I was feeling worse. The pain was pretty bad. I was on pretty heavy painkillers at that point, to kind of manage what I was going through. So still feeling pretty low, that things weren't going to get better, that this was going to be my life. I remember telling my husband, we need to see if we can find a wheelchair. Like I'm going to end up in a wheelchair from this. Like there's no way that this is going to get better. But once I did the radiation, I slowly started to be able to bear weight again. I actually started doing swimming classes to try to regain some strength that I had lost. Since I wasn't able to bear weight, but I could be in the pool. So that actually helped me tremendously to be able to
Awesome.
move again and to feel a little better. And I still do that swim class today because it just helped me so much in the beginning. And ultimately, I ended up being on pemetrexed and carboplatin for it was just over 2 months before they saw progression in my lungs. My oncologist had originally said, "We're hoping to get 6 months on this treatment plan." So that was pretty disappointing to only make it 2 months. I was like, "My cancer must be much more aggressive. Maybe treatments just aren't gonna work for me. This is just a sign of things to come." But again, my oncologist, I shared all of these things with her. We have a very, like, open relationship where the first portion of our appointment is usually, like, me venting about everything I'm dealing with, and then we get into the medicine the second half. During that appointment, after I had had progression, she went through what my options were, that I could go to Enhertu next, which was she was very hopeful about. I could go on a clinical trial, which was an option for me, or I could continue with like another type of chemotherapy, that there are others similar to carboplatin and pemetrexed, that I could do something else like that. So she went through the pros and cons of each, the side effects that I would experience within HER2, what to expect. And ultimately I chose to go within HER2, which I'm very grateful that I did. My situation very quickly within HER2 started to improve. So right away we saw that my liver lesions, which were innumerable, I was routinely having really high liver enzyme counts. I think at one point, right after I was diagnosed, my liver enzymes went up to like 700, which normally a normal person, your liver enzymes are like 40, I think is like the top count that they look for. And mine was in the 700s. My liver was just not handling treatment very well. But once I started in HER2, they started dropping really dramatically, and we saw really great really great response in my liver, which was amazing. My bones started healing really quickly. I started being able to walk again. I started getting some of my energy back. The fatigue started going away, other than the treatment itself would cause, fatigue and nausea. But in between these intervals, I started feeling more like myself. So I'm just really grateful for that line of treatment.
How amazing, because and it's just really so difficult because you didn't even really get one full scan out of the first line, right? And
Yeah.
this second line has just been so it just shows the power of a targeted therapy, right? This is something made specifically for her too. And
Yes, exactly.
right. And how long have you been on this now? It's been
Yeah. So we're just short of a year.
and are you every 3 weeks, Lauren? So you go back
Yes.
and so what's it like? I mean, a lot of people on targeted therapies, we a lot of them are oral, some of them are
Mhm.
infusion. You obviously have to go to an infusion center every few weeks. Are you every 3 weeks? Is that your cycle?
Yes. So I'm every 3 weeks, and it's a 2-hour drive to Boston for me for
Yeah.
every 3
Right.
weeks. So from that perspective, it does kind of weigh on you a little bit. So we actually just recently I'm now doing a 4-week interval just to have a little bit of a break. Since I've been on it for so long, the fatigue kind of builds, over time. So the first infusion I had was much easier than the infusions I'm having now. Um, the nausea is a little heavier, the fatigue is a little heavier. My oncologist said, you're still doing great, you're still stable, so let's try it every 4 weeks. But yeah, I mean, the last year on Enhertu has been just fantastic. My main side effects have been the fatigue, the nausea. I did have some hair loss. So I used to have kind of long, long straight hair, which is now kind of coming in as this new like curly hairdo. But those have been kind of my main side effects. So I consider myself pretty lucky in the grand scheme of things. And HER2 has only been available for HER2 lung cancer for, I think, coming up on like 3 years. So it hasn't been available for very long. So previously, if HER2 hadn't been there, my only option after having progression would have just been another chemo or a clinical trial. So I am really grateful for Enhertu that way as well. And, while I've been on it, other treatments have kind of popped up as options. We have an oral option available now. So, still, I still have that feeling of hope that there's kind of focus now on her too, or starting to be anyway.
I love it. And then we're going to end here because I think this is the perfect message and it's so true. Hope does come from research, right? It helps,
Hmm.
gives us the knowledge that we can carry on. There's other things underway. So really so happy to
Absolutely.
hear all that. So thank you so much once again.
Yeah. Thank you.